But just want to thank, you want to go to the second slide, Joe?
Sure.
I'll let Joe introduce himself when he gets started, but I've been with CAM since August of last year. I've been in the SolidWorks channel for almost 20 years, working with CAD and CAM and customers in Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky. And I recently joined CAMS back in August, and so I'm happy to be here. For those of you that are maybe don't know anything about CAMS, we handle CAMWorks, we handle SolidWorks. We also handle 3D printers. We have the Mark Forge printer line and the Big Rep printer line. So, but today we're going to focus on PDM and how it works and what it can do for you. So, and Joe's going to cover that here in just a little bit. But right now, if you want to go to the third slide there, Joe. With this COVID-19 pandemic going on right now, you know, it's affecting everybody. I've had to learn a few new things. Just a little story just to get things started. One of the new things I learned was this weekend. I learned two things. One, that you don't fill your manure spreader full of real heavy, wet manure because it tends to break the manure spreader. And the second thing I learned was how to fix the manure spreader after you break it. So those are the two things that I learned this weekend, and hopefully they'll be useful to me in the future. And I also learned about grade 5 bolts on shear pins. That the soft ones don't work very good. The grade 5 ones are the ones that got the 3 little marks on the top of the bolt. So I'm not mechanically inclined a whole lot, but I did learn a few things this weekend. So I'm sure everybody's learning something, and today we're all going to learn something new from Joe, pick up some new things. If you already have PDM, he's going to go over some things that might help you enhance your implementation already. If you don't have PDM now and you're thinking about it, this is going to open up a lot of questions for you. Joe can answer all the questions you want at the end of the thing, or we can schedule a time to, you know, just to kind of go over specifically some of your needs and what you want to do in the future. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Joe, and he can introduce himself, and we'll go forward from there. Thank you all for being here today.
Okay, thanks, Don. My name is Joseph Cutrona, and my email is joe@cutmetalfast. If there are any questions or if anybody wants to leverage me as a resource after the fact, even if you're not a customer of ours, we hope to help you out in any way we can, and maybe you will be in the future. With that said, I've been doing PDM primarily for about the last 7 years. I've been a SolidWorks applications engineer for over a decade. And I came from the architectural world. I was the designer and drafter in the 2D world. And then I found an opportunity to move over into this channel around 2010. And I've worked with a couple of other VARs, and I joined CAMS. It's been a little over 6 months ago, actually. And with that said, that's one of the things that we should update everybody on. We've recently picked up product lines that were not currently available through CAMS. So that's part of our growth and our organic expansion internally, is just to be able to support more products and bring more value to our customer base. So we support and have expertise in all of these products shown on the screen. Now, the one that we're here for today is PDM. So if you're not familiar, I'll kind of start at the bottom. PDM is Product Data Management, and it's essentially a vault. A lot of people just refer to it very simply as a vault. And with that, you get a purpose-built system for managing all of the design data, all of the relative data, everything that's even remotely related to your products or your processes at your company. We can put that in the vault and put that in the PDM, however you prefer. So really, under the why topic, we've got things like, well, it's going to give you organization. And with any product line, I don't care if you make simple parts, but especially if you make complex assemblies at your company, whatever your product is, it's nice to have that stuff organized, especially as we go through revision changes as we add new products, as we expand options for our customers, maybe just simple configurations. And then again, the big one is revisions. As a product changes over time, how do you keep track of all of that explosion of data? Because let's face it, we're working with high-powered tools. If you're talking about SolidWorks, if you're talking about CAM, if you're talking about simulation, any of these high modern technologies that we use in an engineering or product development company, they make a lot of files. And a lot of those files are complex in nature in some way or another. Maybe they relate to other files, or maybe they are constantly changing, or maybe they are related to a database in some way. These are not just simple files, simple as you might consider a text file simple or a Word document simple. There's a lot of embedding, there's a lot of linking, and a lot of versioning. And then that speaks to history. With versions, we want to keep track. If I've shipped one customer version A way back when, I need to still be able to get that drawing up, maybe cut one of those parts from time to time if that customer needs support in the future. But we may have long since moved on to a new revision, a better version of that product. So a couple of the why points that I'll bring up here is the UI. First off, it's Windows Explorer. Anybody in the office world has experience with Windows Explorer. And unless you've used Mac your whole life, and that's probably not at work, you know what Windows Explorer is. You know how to right-click and you know how to browse through folders. So that means that this system isn't so much new to you. If you're implementing PDM, a lot of times the feedback we get from users is that it's familiar. They already know how to kind of get around. Even if they don't know all the advanced features, they know the basics of how to find files and navigate through projects. Another one is organization, and that just gives us confidence across the company. Whether I'm on the shop floor or an engineer, I'm going to be able to find the files that I need because everything is neat. The vault makes it easy to keep things neat. And again, when we're talking about SolidWorks and CAM and CAD and CNC files, they're not neatly organized in and of themselves. We have to employ some method to keep track of things. Now with that, we get a little bit faster, a little bit more productive as we are using these tools. If we're leveraging something to help me stay organized, then I don't have to spend time manually organizing. Keeping track of a spreadsheet for revisions, for example. Keeping track of a spreadsheet for part numbers, as another example. The Vault is going to automatically do that stuff for you. And then searching. Wouldn't it be nice if I could search for a part? Maybe it's a simple O-ring or something that I know I have. Maybe I know I've got several of them. I've downloaded it multiple times. But if I can't find that thing fast enough, I'll go get another one from McMaster-Carr. Or maybe I'll just model a simple part. If I can't find it very quickly, I'll model it again. And that's bad for business because now we've got duplicates. Now one assembly uses yours, one assembly uses mine. And so a good PDM allows us to search. That's another good why. And then finally, and this is just a short list, there's a lot of whys that we could come up with, and you'll see some more as we jump into the software. But I think the right data for the right person at the right time is a very big one, this last bullet point there. And what that refers to is the fact that we have statuses in PDM. I can put a file in the PDM folder. Again, it's built on Windows. So I can put a file in that folder, but the fact that I can see it is based on a lot of permissions and the status that it's in. So it might be in the vault, but if I'm on the shop floor, I can't see it unless it's also released or approved or ready for production, whatever we name the status that's available to shop floor people. And similarly, if a file's in concept status, my engineers can see that, but maybe no one else can. So it's not just organizing things, it's also pushing it through this life cycle or workflow, as you'll see some more of. So before I get to the how, and the how is really about implementing and training. How would we make something like this live at our company? What are the steps to really get there? Before I jump into this, I'm going to take a break and go out of the PowerPoint. And I'm just going to start from scratch here. Let's say I'm opening a Windows folder. First time I sit down at my computer in the morning, what am I going to do? If I'm using a PDM, how would that look? For the user, it looks just like a folder. The same way that I could browse under my program files here, I can browse under the Vault folder. Mine's named Demo Vault. Yours might be named after your company. It might be named Engineering Vault. It's really up to you. And as you'll see, a lot of the things in this vault are completely customizable. Completely up to you. Now, there is a preview pane here. And there's what we call a data card. And there's several other tabs, but before I get to that, I want to kind of minimize this and show that it really is just like Windows Explorer. If I browse under my Documents folder, maybe I go down under Projects, and I can see where I've got some design data. Eventually down here, I'm going to be able to find a CAD file. If I dig deep enough in my vault, you know, I'll get to gauge tables, forming tools, whatever we have related to our product data. Now, a big benefit, a big plus to this system, I would say, I'll just maximize, again, it's just a Windows Explorer window. I can browse out to my desktop with one click. But just like that, I can also hit the back button and be back in the vault. And I can have multiple of these open. I can be browsed. So I don't want to beat a dead horse, but really this is just a Windows Explorer extension. They've built it in a way that makes it really easy for people to pick up because it's just built inside of Windows Explorer. So let's take a look through these tabs really quick and kind of see what PDM is giving us. The first one is a preview, and this is a fully functional eDrawings preview. I can measure, I can mark up, I can zoom and pan and all the things that you would want to do, maybe especially if you were on the on the shop floor. If I don't have SolidWorks, but I want to be able to spin this model around and rotate it, that's pretty nice. And I can't do it without downloading some kind of previewer. I mean, you can download eDrawings, obviously, but it's nice to have it built right in. The next one is what we call the data card, and this is custom to every company. You'd have your logo here, and you'd have the values that you care about here. If you don't use drawing number, we take it off. We put something else there. It's that simple. I like to call ownership. This is the way I've always referred to things like who the drawn by and the approved by. But really, it's totally configurable. Comments, something generic like comments or costs. Totally up to you. Now, material is grayed out. You can see that I can't type anything there, even though I have this file checked out. And the reason is that's a one-way push. My users are able to select material inside of SolidWorks, and that shows out here, but I can't accidentally tinker with it because that doesn't work with that material library. Anybody who's a SolidWorks user is probably familiar with that. You can right-click on the tree inside of SolidWorks and pick a material. Now, with that said, things like description are also connected to the file properties. New description. So if I type this in and save it and check it in, I got some buttons up top here that I'm pointing out just because they're pretty useful. But back to Windows and being familiar, everything is under the right-click menu. I can also check it in from here. So if I check that in, new description, I can rightfully expect that even the title block has been updated. These values on the data card are pushing and pulling from the properties in the PDM system. So now let's talk about this, maybe the process a little bit and what some of these other values mean. So I've got two versions of that file now. If I pull down the history by hitting this button or right-clicking, or that's also found here, you can get to things a few different ways. But if I pull this up, I can see, oh, well, that second version, that's because a new description was added. And this file is in an under editing status, which means it's in concept. You might call that work in progress at your company. And the workflow at this company looks something like this. My first state is under editing, and after that, I can send it for approval. So what does that look like? How do I send a file for approval? Well, going back to the user interface that people are familiar with, we get a lot of good feedback from new users that say, hey, it's pretty easy to pick up. Well, I right-click and I would change the state. And that submit for approval is one of the options I can see there. So I'll go ahead and click submit for approval. And these comments, they're not just, it's not just a new rule or a new thing you have to do and take up your time. These are really notes to my future self. Honestly, that's what I find is more useful about these. And I get the same from users that I implement with. It's nice when you go back to this file in a year to remember or have a little note there so that you don't have to remember. Why did we take this file from Rev A to Rev B? Or why was there 10 versions before it ever got to Rev A? So some of these little hints as you go back to the history are not only valuable for something like an audit or a manager, but they're also valuable to me as a designer. You can see what happened and who did it and why. So the next thing, if we go back to this flow chart, and this is the administrative tool that I've popped up now. If I wanted to add a new state, something like prototype, I can do that. And then I can add a transition, send to proto. This is not only a flow chart that looks pretty, it is also the builder. So as an administrator or as a manager, this system isn't only easy to use, it's also easy to administer. So I can save that, and now any file that is waiting for approval, it can either pass, it can get sent back, or it can send to proto. And let's go take a look at how that appears in the system. So change state, and now my send to proto is there. Well, we're going to go ahead and pass the approval because I want you to see the revision update here on the data card. And again, pointing back to some automation that you'll see, part of the productivity and the why. Now I don't have to open that and update the title block. That's one less thing I have to do as an engineer. So that's increasing my throughput. I can jump to something else now. I know that the emails have been sent to whoever they're supposed to go to. My initials are put on the title block. The rev is put on the title block. And so that's a little bit about the workflow. And then from there, that file could go for an engineering change order, or maybe we've got different names for different statuses at our company. Might go out to a vendor approval. All of that is completely up to you. Again, these states and transitions, you can name them whatever you like. There's no predetermined workflows that you have to adjust your business to. This system adjusts itself to your business. So the tabs we've talked about, preview, data card, the versions, that's really showing me the same thing that's here. How many times has this file been changed? That's what a version basically is. And if I go under the history, I'll see each version has a line that's related to what happened, whether it was checked in, whether it transitioned through the workflow, who did it, and so on. The bill of materials. Now I'm going to go to a different project to show you the bill of materials because I've got a very large project. This Bolter 77D, if I show you a preview on the e-drawings, you can see this is a large construction assembly. It's actually used in the construction of mine shafts. So my computer, the fans actually just started because this is actually a very large assembly. Now, jumping to the Bill of Materials tab, what does that mean for a BOM? Well, with the top level file selected, it's showing me the entire BOM. Now, I could switch to one of the sub-assemblies like this boom, and now I'm seeing just the BOM for that. But I can also start from the top and use this side panel to drill down. So a lot of information available to me very quickly, whether or not there's a BOM on the drawing or a drawing at all. This system understands SolidWorks references, and I'm going to get to that as the on a later slide as a benefit to the user. But really, this one is huge. If you have ever chased down a broken reference as a CAD user, you understand how frustrating that can be. If I needed to make a change to this boom today, and maybe this is a product that's been around at our company for a long time, and it may not even open well in SolidWorks. You know, errors, missing references, I've got to deal with all of that before I can make a change. As long as we're printing and selling and producing this thing, no big deal. We can let all those errors fly, and you open it in SolidWorks and CMS, okay, just close it. I'm not dealing with that today. But if you've got to make a change, man, it could take part of your day and really hurt productivity. So the references, PDM understands all of the references, and it doesn't matter if I rename a file or move a file, it still keeps track of the references. If you don't have a PDM, that's a big no-no. I can't just take this boom and move it to another folder because that would break references. But in PDM, that's no big deal. Rename files, move files, you don't have to worry about it anymore. The Contains tab is similar to the Bill of Materials. It's just showing me references specifically without all of the descriptions and the revisions and the part numbers necessarily. The Contains tab is more specifically designed to show me references. Children is the Contains, parents is the where used. So if I dig down for a part, let's go to the Contains tab and find a part. I'll right click and say Browse to. So that opens up a new Windows Explorer session with that file selected. And with that file selected, I'll look at the where used. And we can see the kind of bottom-up view of those references. Again, it's similar to a BOM, but now we're looking at it from the bottom up. And some of these files are in the components folder, some of them are in the main CAD files folder, but we're keeping track of versions as we go along. And so that's really all of the tabs. And with that said, let's take a stop off here and jump back to this, something a little easier to look at. There's a lot in PDM, especially once you start looking at the bills of materials and the references and all of the buttons that you have. But it really is, for all intents and purposes, a simple system to use. I can find a file easily, I can browse easily, I can right click and find the options that I'm looking for. Now, with all that said, okay, maybe I've convinced you about the why, or maybe you already knew that this was a good product. Well, how do we get it implemented? The very first step is to install it on the server. You do need a server for this product, and it needs to be fairly modern, I would say, but it doesn't have to be a powerhouse server. A lot of companies invest in a very basic server and use it as a standalone server for PDM. If it's just running PDM, it doesn't have to be super powerful. The install to put it on the server takes about 3 to 4 hours. And we, in almost all cases, we're involved in that. Unless you just want to do it yourself, of course, that's something you can do. But we typically will be involved in this. We'll log in remotely and install the software so that the settings and everything are ready to go and there's no hiccups. We don't want you to have to stumble your way through that when we do it often enough. The next step is to try and figure out what we want to build out of the vault. That data card, what fields should it have on it? That workflow, what steps do our files go through? And so that's about a 4-hour meeting typically. And in that meeting, we would want anybody who's been around a long time and really knows the process, anybody who makes decisions, like a manager maybe, who wants to have control of how we release drawings. We call that maybe a stakeholders meeting. Process workshop is another good term for that. And in that meeting, we have it down to a science. Again, I've been doing this for a lot of years, so we can make it pretty clear and concise, answer these questions. I've got a spreadsheet that guides us through that. So, what variables do we want to search? In other words, if I'm looking for a file, what info would I have? Maybe I usually search by description. Okay, then that's what we're putting on your data card. Next question is, who has the final say-so before a file's ready for production? Okay, that's what our workflow starts to look like. And then we want to train people. And we don't want to train them on a generic vault. We want to train them on your vault. So that's why the order is somewhat important here. It's not set in stone, but it certainly is ideal if we can build your vault with the main stakeholders and then start to roll it out to people. So we're not training them on a demo vault. We're training them on your vault. When you get ready to send to production, which is a term they've heard as long as they've been there, or when you get ready to do ECR, which is a term you guys always use, then you right-click here. And so we make a mix of terms and familiar ideas that your company already holds close to heart, and then we translate those into PDM, and that's what we train people on. And the admin training, we can spend a day on that. The user training, you can't really spend more than 4 hours on a user training. Again, it's a simple system to use. The next step is commitment, maybe locking down the old system. If the old system is a share folder, we make it read-only. If the old system is workgroup PDM, again, we set it to read-only, and we start telling people any change that you do needs to be done in the new vault. And that's how we make people commit to the system. So that's about the how. Next up is the what's in it for me. And I like this acronym, what's in it for me. It took me a second to really grasp it, but really to an end user, what's the benefit? And to talk a little bit about the benefit, I want to focus on this graphic here. So there's a couple of folks on a scooter, and they look to be going pretty fast, the way that the background is blurred, and that may just be a Photoshop effect, but I see a few things wrong with that. Number one, she doesn't have on good shoes even, and neither of them have a helmet on. And I don't think a scooter that small is meant for two people. So in other words, they're going really fast, and they're on a nice machine, but they're totally unprotected. Kind of throwing caution to the wind in some sense. And I like to relate this to SolidWorks because you can get a lot done with SolidWorks. You can install a seat of SolidWorks on a new laptop, and you can design and put your ideas, translate this fantastic mechanical idea from your brain to the models and eventually to the drawings that put that on paper for a machine shop to get it done and get it sold. But if you're not wearing a helmet along the way, if you're not vaulting those revisions, you could end up in a crash. And that crash is going to be worse than it had to be because you don't have any history of the changes. You don't have your files backed up. you don't know what led to what was changed from Rev A to Rev B and so on and so forth. You don't know, especially in a collaborative environment, two people working on the same data set. That can be a big issue without any kind of vault. I'm saving the same file that you're saving. Well, let's hope that whoever saves last was the best at designing, because that's the one we have. The other one is gone. And then what else is in it for me? Broken references is maybe the biggest one that I hear. People just go, like, I really get a lot of wow out of this. Some folks go into an implementation. We might be sitting in that process meeting, and they really haven't heard yet that this is going to fix broken references. Blows people away because they spend a lot of time fighting that. SolidWorks makes parametric data, so if something gets renamed or moved, you guys that are SolidWorks users, you know all about that. The next one is security and sharing. If I've got somebody in the shop floor, somebody on the sales team, somebody in purchasing, they may come to me for everything today. Hey, can you print this drawing for me? Hey, tell me a little bit about it. Hey, take a measurement here. Hey, customer called and wants this. Well, with PDM, they can get it themselves. And it's very easy to expect and to ask folks to do that. It's a folder. Browse into your vault, do a search if you like, and that's something I'll jump back into the software for because I haven't shown you the search tool yet. But also security. So if that salesperson isn't supposed to see my files that are just now in concept, I don't want them selling that new rev yet, and they're not going to. That's all built in. You know, you could ask them to do the same thing on a server share. Maybe you're not using a PDM today and they come to you for everything. And the reason is that you don't want them seeing everything that's on the server share. That's where you do your new design concepts. That's where you've got example files and, you know, competitor files and things. And you just, you know, you don't want them accidentally deleting something in there. So PDM gives you this ability to share across the company, cross-function teams, and know that they're not going to see what they're not supposed to at the same time. Now, the next thing is purpose-built. So things like copy tree, that's another one that I'll jump back into the software and show you. If I'm making a project that's like another project, there's a tool for that. If I want to initiate an engineering change order, there's a button for that. If I want to do a quick measurement on the preview screen, there's a button for that. There's just all these purpose-built features that are literally designed to help you manage this complex data. And then the final one, I guess this is just gravy or icing on the cake, is that a lot of the clerical things that you might just feel bored with and feel, you know, tied down by, printing a PDF, sending an email to somebody that a new rev is updated, updating the title block. This system does all those things for you so that a designer can stay focused on designing. And with that said, I'll jump back over to the vault because I want to show you the search tool. So maybe I'm a manager and I really don't know how we've done this project structure. I'm just looking for a file today. Well, this button is the search tool. And again, it's just a Windows Explorer session, so you don't have to, you know, use the entire screen. But this little button allows me to open up a search. And this search tool, this is very similar in terms of building this to the data card. The same way that I build a data card is the same way that I build this search tool. In other words, if I want description here, I put description there. If I prefer part number up top, then I put it there. So let's just do a quick expander. I know that's a part that has... Okay, I got no results. And the reason is that I'm searching in that folder that I started from. So I was in that folder when I hit the search tool, and that's not where I want to be. I want to search the entire vault. So I'm going to back up, search the entire vault. now I've got some results. And from this window, I can check out the data card. I can check out the preview. It's a toggle on, toggle off kind of thing. So there's my search button. I'm back in a regular Windows session. Now I'm in the search tool Windows session. And I really like to highlight that this keeps your desktop clean. I don't have to have one search tool that's some different animal that I need to learn how to use. It's built right in. Another nice thing here is to point out that these reference tabs, these are like breadcrumb trails. I really love the fact that you can right-click and browse to another file. So I might not know exactly where a file is, but I might know what assembly it's used in. So you can find the assembly first, and then find the subassembly, and then find ultimately the part. And then it's just a nice little breadcrumb trail of where, oh, maybe I'll go down to another assembly here. These are just different versions of the same assembly. But you can have, one little window open for each step of the hunting process that you did. And users really end up loving that one. Now, another feature that I want to show is the copy tree tool. So let me jump out of the search tool and find a project that's decently large in size. Don't want to rename that folder. So satellite receiver. This looks okay. It's not that big, but it'll work. So under the tools menu, I have something called copy tree. And this is essentially pack and go. If you're a SolidWorks user, you may know what pack and go is all about. This just allows me to make a new assembly that's like the old assembly, but I can say, well, in the new one, I don't want a new PC board. The PC board is going to be the same in the new assembly. So I'll make this CAD files new. And then maybe I can check them in on copy. I can include drawings or not include drawings and just say go. So what this is doing is it's going to create, for the files that have a check mark, it created a new file. But for the file that I unchecked, it's pointing back to the original. So just another purpose-built tool that's just designed to let you work quicker. I just realized that we're going a couple minutes long. That was the search tool, the copy tree tool. There's a few other tools in here. It's important to know that I don't have all of these files. Maybe these projects, there may be a few of these projects that I've never worked on and will never need to work on. So when I browse into that project, the files will look like they're there on my C drive, but maybe they're not. And I'll show you what that looks like. Let me browse up, go to CAD files, and then under tools, I'm going to clear my local cache. So now on this version tab, in some cases, I can see just a dash where something is not actually on my machine. These are all checked out to me. So let's check one in and try that again. So if a file's not checked out to me, then it doesn't necessarily need to be on my machine. In other words, this is just a way to keep the disk clean. So that file, if I pick on that file, I can see that there really isn't a local version. It appears as if it's here on my machine, even though maybe another engineer just created that file. I can see it immediately. And if I need to use it, all I have to do, this dash will turn to a 1 as soon as I do one of three things: preview, check it out, or open it. At that point, the vault goes and gets the copy from the server, whatever is the latest and greatest copy of that file, and brings it to me. And of course, I can see the history of that file even before I've got a local copy. But now I have one of one here on my machine. You can see one of one. And then the last thing I guess I'll show is if I'm an engineer and I have the right to do so, I can go back and get old versions. Just as simple as this. Go back to version 2. I want to accept all of those yeses and nos. Now, if I print this or open it, I am looking at version 2, or Rev A out of Rev B. And so that's just an action button. Go back and get an old copy. And I can get latest again. Of course, that would be I wanted to save some time for question and answer. I hope that no one's in a huge hurry because I'm not. If you can stay around, I can. And Don, feel free to chime in at this point. Are there any areas of that presentation that someone, and you should be able to all unmute yourself or raise your hand in the software and I can see, but if anybody would like to see more of a certain area or maybe has questions about something you didn't see. Okay, I've got a question here on the screen, and I don't know if you guys can see it. If we open a SolidWorks file that was last saved in SolidWorks 2018, and save it in 2020, will the history of that file through PDM allow me to restore back to 2018? Absolutely. And that's a great point. So in your vault or in your system today, you may not have the ability to work with a vendor. Let's say one of your suppliers or vendors is working with 2017. Well, you'd really love to upgrade to 2020, but you know you can't work with that guy anymore. With PDM, you can always save that history, yes. And so that old copy, that check-in, which would create a version, would open as 2017, or sorry, 2018, as you mentioned. And then if I open the latest version, then that's going to be the one that's upgraded. In fact, that's something that I always have to do when I'm building a demo vault. We download a lot of these files from SolidWorks, and you go ahead and check them in, and they'll be old, you know, whatever version the demo was created in, 2018. So one of the very first things I do in my demo vaults is I save it to SolidWorks 2020 and then check it in again. And so now I've got 2 versions on my demo data just that quickly. Thank you. Good question, Brian. I will make a quick note here. At cutmetalfast.com. So anybody that maybe if a question comes up after the fact, you guys feel free to reach out to me. But I've got a couple of other questions coming in. How do CNC programmers need to be set in terms of permissions? So this is a great question. If I am a CNC programmer and I'm using something like CamWorks that's making a change to the CAD file, then I need to have checkout permissions in whatever status that file is in. So let's say, for example, if I can escape out of this, let's say, for example, that we send files for approval, and then once they're released, that's where we do our CNC design. Well, I need to allow certain users then to have checkout permission in that status. And adjusting permissions is very simple. I can turn it on, I can turn it off. Anybody who can access this workflow, anyone who has permissions to to access this workflow editor can change the permissions of a group. So it would be very, very common to have a group like, well, of course you'd have engineering, and they're going to have their permissions, but you're also going to have groups like CNC programmers. I'm not sure if that has two M's, so I'll just leave it. And then from there, it's a matter of state permissions. And there's two ways to get to these same permissions. I showed you one. I can click on that state and choose check-in, or I can go to the group themselves. It's the same thing, just two different ways to get there. So CNC programmer, go to the state, approved, and say, well, even after a file is released, I need these guys to check it out in order to make their CNC changes to the CAD file, to add those toolpaths to the native CAD file. Now, additionally, if I don't like that idea, if that doesn't seem very appropriate to be making changes to approved files, then it very well may be a case of adjusting our workflow so that before it gets to final approved, we have CNC programming. And so it has to go that route first in some cases. Go to there, and then from there, once the CNC guy is done, then he makes the final release. A lot of ways to set that up, a lot of ways to skin that cat. Can I update my entire vault parts to 2020? There is actually a tool to do file version upgrade. This is a great question, Robert. If I browse down under, I'll just pick any one of these, and under my C drive, this is a pop quiz for me. With SolidWorks PDM, anytime you install it, you also get something called file version update. Actually, it might be in the install files. Downloads, installers. I would have to, there is a program, Robert. This is a great question. And I'm a little on the spot about where to find it. But there is a, under the installation files, there is a tool that comes with PDM called File Version Upgrade. And it is essentially a batch file tool that opens and saves all of your files. And it'll handle, it's got a few different options. For example, do you want that to be a new revision, or do you want it to save over the last revision? I've got a good video that, well, I did that in a previous life, so I'm not sure if I can access the video on that file. But that is a great question, and we could certainly follow up. If you're looking at doing that, I'd be happy to help you walk through that file version upgrade tool. It's in the install files, and I'm not sure that I kept the SolidWorks there. No, not there. SolidWorks 2020. It is in the install files somewhere. And where is just a good question. Where are my install files? It's part of the installation media kit. And it takes some time, and you want to back up everything first, because it uses a C to SolidWorks to open and save every file and then check it back in and either make a new revision or save over your last copy. Great question. Please feel free to reach out to me after the fact. Open door policy, of course. Well, I want to thank everyone for attending today, for your attention, and for your questions. if you have any questions related to PDM or any of the products that we serve and support, please do feel free to reach out to myself or Don. And I believe Don, he's just the same, Don at Cut Metal Fast.